Okay, I'd like to welcome Skip Knuttgen this afternoon to talk to us a little bit about his editorship of the college's journal, and he was also president of the college and has been involved for many, many years. So welcome, Skip.
Thank you, Jack,
for coming by and talking to us. And I know from our other conversations that your association with the college and many of the key members go back a long way, but I just sort of wanted to start with where you're at now and what you're doing, and you're still very active. And
yeah. Well, beginning with the olden times first, I joined in 1961 at the urging of Peter Karpovich, because I had spent 2 years at the University of Copenhagen in the laboratory of Erling Asmussen, and when I was appointed to the faculty of Boston University, I contacted Karpovich, and he says, well, I've got an organization that you must join. But anyway, what I'm doing now is I have an appointment at the Harvard University Medical School in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, and I have the pretentious title of Senior Lecturer in Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. And one of the very positive features of the appointment is that the former chair of the department and the current chair are very enthusiastic about my continuing to work in sports medicine.
that helps.
And one of the great joys in life that I've had for the last 15 years is serving as coordinator of scientific publications for the IOC Medical Commission.
Oh, wow.
So they're very supportive of that.
Yeah.
And we produce an encyclopedia of sports medicine that we're up to, I think it's volume 13 and volume 14 coming out. And we have handbooks on the various Olympic sports. And it gives me the opportunity to work with some of the top people in the world in sports medicine, sports science. And many of them are, of course, involved with ACSM. Mm-hmm. And so it continues my involvement there, but it also keeps me up with things that are going on both clinically and in the various sports sciences.
Mm-hmm. Probably some good travel opportunities as well.
Yes, as a matter of fact. And I got turned on to travel when I finished my master's degree. I taught a year at a prep school, and a number of the faculty there had spent time in Europe and were telling me about traveling around Europe. And I thought that was really exotic. So I saved up my money, and in the summer of 1954, I traveled over to Europe, having also determined that the World Cup in football or soccer was going to take place in Switzerland. And I had been a soccer player, and then I had accepted a position as the first coach of varsity men's soccer and lacrosse at Ohio State University.
I'll be darned.
So anyway, I was a soccer fan.
Yeah.
And I went over, and a friend of mine that had been at Springfield College when I was there, he joined forces with me, and we purchased a car, and we drove around through something like 12 countries and saw the World Cup in soccer and so forth. Anyway, that sort of planted the bug of travel. So the next World Cup would be held 4 years after in Sweden. And my mother's parents were Swedish speaking, although not officially Swedish, because they lived on some islands that were awarded to Finland. But I saved up the money, and 1958 went over and teamed up with 2 other people that I knew and drove around to some more countries, saw the World Cup, etc. This leads me to confide in you that as a result of those trips, then becoming Secretary General of the International Federation of Sports Medicine and working with the IOC Medical Commission, I've been to 60 different countries.
Wow.
So, and I love it.
I know. It seems like when I run into you, it's in an airport.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask before I moved on, when you went to Copenhagen,
Yeah.
was Bengt Saltine there then, or what? How did?
No, Bengt is Swedish.
No, but I thought he studied with Asmussen.
No, Hovey Christensen.
Oh, okay.
There were three.
Then Krog was it?
Well, that sometimes the historians miss something there.
Okay, maybe you could explain that a little bit.
Okay, August Krog was a very famous physiologist at the University of Copenhagen.
Mm-hmm.
And to August Krog came there one day a Danish physician whose name was Johannes Lindhard. And physical education was very firmly entrenched in the Danish school system. And the word for it was gymnastik. And there were two types of gymnastik. One was redskabsgymnastik, equipment gymnastik, which was the parallel bars and high bar and so forth, and frittstående gymnastik, which is the freestanding and can be done to music and so forth.
Sure.
Okay. He said, it's very nice that we have this in the schools. Why do we have gymnastik as a requirement in our schools? Oh. Does it really do any good? Questions that are being raised presently.
Yeah.
And the laboratory was founded with the help of August Krog. And it was called Gymnastik Teoretiske Laboratorium. Laboratory for the theory of gymnastics, the theory of physical education.
Yeah.
So Johannes Lindhard was really the driving force and the scientific investigator. And there were three graduate students that came through at one time and became called the French relationship, the Three Musketeers.
Oh, yeah.
Erling Asmussen, Erik Hovey Christensen, and Marius Nielsen. Following World War II, Erik Hovey Christensen was invited to come to Stockholm and start a laboratory there. When I came to the University of Copenhagen in 1959, Asmussen was really the scientific leader of the laboratory, but there was another person who had the title of professor that would show up one morning a week for coffee and sign letters and papers and so forth. Very nice fellow, but he had delegated everything to Asmussen. And I started my research and I got into lactic acid, pyruvic acid analysis following exercise. And they were conducting some similar experiments in Stockholm. So Erling Asmussen suggests that I go up to Stockholm and visit with them there. While there, I met Ostrand, his wife, who they were not married then, Irma Rieming, and a whole host of other investigators. And there was a medical student that was working in the laboratory while he was studying medicine, Bengt Saltine.
I'll be darned. Okay.
So Bengt and I met, I think, in 1960.
Well, thank you. That was always fuzzy in my mind. I never quite understood.
And then, of course, Bengt was invited to come in recent years to the University of Copenhagen and be the professor there, essentially succeeding Asmussen.
I guess we should switch gears and talk a little bit about this, but I want to come back to talk about Springfield College too.
Okay.
But so one of the things I've talked to the current editor of MSSE, and I've talked to Tipton and Raven and Kent Pandolf, and so you're the earliest editor that I'm able to talk to. Bruno, of course, has passed away, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Buzzkirk for a while.
Right.
So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about those earlier years of the journal and some of the, if you remember, some of the issues and the title, if people were happy with it, did people not like it? I guess you did only 4 a year at that
Originally,
time.
yeah.
So any of your remembrances about that, Skip? What?
Okay, I won't be able to identify the exact years, but it had to be.
Yeah.
You have the establishment of the journal?
Yeah, it started in '69.
Okay.
With
so
Bruno was the
right.
and then.
So I think it was in 1968. If you have a list of when Carl Blythe was president.
Yeah, I have it over there, but
anyway, Carl Blythe. Well, let me go back. When you joined the American College of Sports Medicine, you were automatically subscribed to a journal that came out of Italy.
Oh yeah.
Which was the Journal of Sports Medicine
and Physical Fitness.
And Physical
was actually
Fitness.
Called, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we all got that.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a very high quality journal, and it was a real mixture of articles. Mm-hmm. And Carl Blythe had really great vision, and he determined, or he raised the question, he says, why do we have this subscription to that? Why don't we have our own journal? So he convened a meeting at the University of Wisconsin, where the national office was located at that time. Mm-hmm. And it included John Faulkner,
Fran
Nagel, Charlie Tipton. Yep. Yeah. We're about 5 or 6. I forget who the others might have been. Yeah. And we developed a plan for starting a journal. And we went further and said that you've got to have a strong leader for this and someone who has international recognition. We recommend Bruno Balke. Mm-hmm. So the college went ahead and officially launched the journal, and Bruno Balke was the first editor. Then another sort of relationship with the journal developed for me, in that I was asked to be on the original editorial board. And in '68 also, there was a World Congress of the Physiological Sciences held in Washington, D.C. Following my experience in Copenhagen, I kept contact with certain people I met over there from the Scandinavian countries, mm-hmm. and also there was a fellow from the Netherlands that came to the lab, and I kept contact with them, and we were all about 30, 35 years of age. And I established a group called the Young Exercise Physiologists. Mm-hmm. And I incorporated 2 Americans, Charlie Tipton, 3 Americans, Charlie Tipton, Phil Galnick, and Larry Rowell. Mm-hmm. And there was Bengt Saltin, and a fellow by the name of Lars Hermansen from Norway, Klaus Clausen from the Netherlands, and a fellow named Jan Snellen, who was from the Netherlands and had been working at the Copenhagen lab. While I was there, he was in temperature regulation. We kept in contact with each other, sometimes visited each other, mm-hmm. and I suggested that we hold a satellite symposium to the World Congress in Washington. So we did that at Boston University, and there was a full-day conference where each person giving a 45-minute lecture on the area of their particular expertise. Mm-hmm. And then I suggested, why don't each of you bring a manuscript covering what you're going to present, and I'll see if we can get published as a supplement to this new journal.
Great idea.
Okay?
Yeah, okay.
So then I submitted it, and then it was some humorous aspects to the whole thing too. I submitted it to Bruno for what was called Medicine and Science in Sport.
Right.
And Bruno said, oh, that's wonderful, because we really don't have manuscripts. I mean, his secretary then told me, well, you know, he's going to set it up in the journal and have 2 or 3 other articles. I said, no. For one thing, we had the finances to subsidize a supplement. I said, I want a supplement. I want it to stand. Well, they didn't have enough for issue number 1. So Bruno finally said, well, okay, that will be volume 1, number 1.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
And as mine was the first presentation, for Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise, I have the article on page 1 of volume 1, number 1. Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
But going back to the title,
Yeah.
after it was decided that we were going to have a journal, we did not make any recommendation what it be called, so it was thrown before the Board of Trustees. And there was considerable discussion back and forth as to whether it should have sport in it and whether it exercise. And I remember Alan Ryan, who always had a odd sense of humor, suggested we call it sports medicine and all that jazz.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, this was the final decision was Medicine and Science in Sport.
Right.
Because it was the American College of Sports Medicine, you had the two terms in there. And it was after my stint as editor, because Bruno passed on the reins to
Buskirk.
Ellsworth Buskirk, and it was still called Medicine
Yeah,
and
it
Science.
changed under Tip.
Exactly, and Tipton succeeded me.
Yeah.
Tipton succeeded me in the presidency, too.
Yeah.
And of course, we're classmates, class of 1952 at Springfield College.
He mentioned that sitting right in that chair this morning. He
Yeah.
thought that was really pretty neat. That,
Yeah. We actually have a photograph someplace, I haven't seen it for years, of me passing over a quill
Oh.
to him that I think Carol Christensen, who was the managing editor, took the photograph. And
The other thing that you would be proud of, Skip, that happened this morning is that Kent Pandolf sat there.
oh yeah,
And he said that my mentor was Skip Knuttgen.
Right.
And he was editor, and then I became editor
right.
because he had been at Boston University, I guess.
He was an undergraduate there, and he went to University of Pittsburgh for his graduate work.
Yeah, we had discussed
Then he came
that.
back to Natick, and then I had a relationship with the United States Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, or
Yeah, that's
USAREUM Natick, and so I had a relationship there, and I, of course, picked up with Kent again. So.
Do you remember any, how it was day-to-day operations when you were editor? I mean, was it tough to get good manuscripts? Was it tough to get a good editorial board? I mean, this is still early on in the journal. Acceptance
Yeah.
in the field.
When the journal was first established, it really included the top people, particularly younger people, who were in the college at that time, from the clinical side of things as well. So it got a good start that way. Obviously, when you start a journal, I mean, you have no manuscripts to start with.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that we started with that Boston Symposium sort of established a quality level.
Yeah.
And
an international flavor, too, right off the bat, I guess, with some of your people.
Oh, yeah. And then when I took over as editor, I made certain appointments, and we were looking for someone to handle the clinical side of things. And I got the recommendation of a fellow that was apparently doing very good work up in Canada, John Sutton.
Oh, yeah, wonderful.
So I recruited John Sutton, and he was actually, I sort of take some pride in that because that got John involved in the college.
In the college, yeah. I thought maybe you were going to say Shepherd. I didn't know when Roy got involved there.
I forget what Roy's relationship to the journal has been through the years.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure he ever
I
was
didn't
on
think
the,
of Sutton, but
yeah. So he was our section editor for clinical work, and Phil Golnick was biochemistry and so forth. And they were responsible for recommending people to do the reviewing, because the manuscript would come in, I would assign it to a section editor, the section editor would say to whom the manuscript should be sent for review. Then they would report back to the section editor would make a recommendation to me, accept, reject, so forth. And I think through the years we've had really high quality people and conscientious. And
where was it printed then? Did you then send the manuscripts off to
Well, a
Wisconsin.
person who was very important to the growth of the whole journal was this Carol Christensen.
Carol, yeah. She was mentioned several times.
Yeah.
By Tip.
She was
especially.
not the original managing editor. There was another person in the ACSM office at the University of Wisconsin. Then she came in along the way.
Yeah, I have her in my book, and I forget her name now, but I don't
Give me an
remember.
hour or so, and I'd come
You
up with
think
it too. Anyway, Carol was very instrumental in determining the layout and processing everything, and I believe that they printed it right there in Madison.
That makes, it would
We had
make
no
sense,
relationship with any publishing
yeah. Any
company.
big publishing
No,
company,
that came all much later.
yeah. In the time we have,
Yeah.
we only have about 5 minutes. Time goes so fast. When you guys were at Springfield,
Yeah,
tell me a little more about that. And so Karpovich was there,
yeah,
and you were there, Tipton was there, Rao was there.
yes. I entered in the autumn of '48 and immediately became introduced to the fact that this Peter Karpovich was a pretty important guy and doing really outstanding work and nationally, internationally recognized, etc. Tipton actually transferred into Springfield, and you'll have to interview him as to when that occurred.
Yeah, or why?
Well, I was starting to smile because I don't want to tell the story,
I should have asked him.
but it
I
was in
didn't.
the days of student unrest, and he
Okay.
was at the University of Maryland. And there was certain unrest, and his photograph appeared in the newspaper, and Tip thought, well, it might be time to move on.
To move
But
on.
Raoul entered Springfield into his freshman year, and he was exactly 2 years behind Tip and me. I like to tell the story that I saved Raoul's life in his sophomore year because I was his dorm counselor, and I ignored the rules about no cooking in the rooms because otherwise he would have starved. But then,
Did you guys get to work with Karpovich a
Yeah.
good bit then as undergrads? Or what?
someone raised the question about that just recently. I was a laboratory assistant for Karpovich in both human physiology and exercise physiology. I forget whether Tip was.
But a lot of places, if you're an undergrad, you really don't get to work with any of the important people
No.
usually. So,
And I don't think he used any undergrads as research assistants. We were laboratory assistants for the teaching programs, but I did serve as a subject in a number of studies. And
and then where did you go after there? Is that when you left there and went to
Penn
Copenhagen?
State.
Oh,
No.
okay.
I got 2 years to go.
All right, that was the
Well,
part we missed.
I was draft bait because the Korean War was going on.
Oh, yeah.
But I had received a student deferment, and then I approached my draft board and said, okay, I'm graduating in June. May I take my physical? Because I'd had an eye injury in high school sports, and the ophthalmologist says they'll probably never take you in the Army because they don't want you being near any explosions. It was a detached retina. And no, you graduate first, and then we'll give you your physical and so forth and determine whether you're going to be taken. In the meantime, I had been turned on to an opportunity at Penn State to go down there and be an assistant coach of soccer and lacrosse.
Oh, okay.
It was back in the days that head coaches didn't have a staff or assistant.
Yeah, right.
So I went there and I got a master's degree. And then coming up to graduation, I approached my draft board and I said, could you give me my physical because I can't look for a job? No, you get your degree first and so forth. So sometime, I think it was in April or May, I was approached by a prep school in the Pittsburgh area. We'd like you to consider a job as a teacher and coach. I said, well, I got this situation. I don't think I'm going to be taken. They said, we'll gamble and hire you. And then I had my physical, and I got the old 4F designation. And it was while I was at the prep school I was introduced to this business of European travel and so forth. And a classmate of mine had gone directly to Oberlin College to coach the soccer and lacrosse there. Ohio State invited him to come down and start varsity teams there. He said, no, I've got a really good position here at Oberlin, don't want to sacrifice that. You might be interested in Skip Knuttgen, who's in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So then I became varsity soccer and lacrosse coach for the next 5 years there.
At Ohio State.
At Ohio State. It also allowed me to study for free. So I got my Ph.D. in applied physiology for no tuition.
Yeah. Was George Lawther at Penn State when you were
Yes,
there?
he was. In fact, his father, John, was on the faculty.
I meant John because George was my coach at Lock Haven.
Okay.
I know that's. I meant to say John actually.
Okay, but George the
was
son.
The son, yeah.
And I think he played goalkeeper, didn't he?
I don't know for sure what position.
But John Lawther was a professor, and I had several classes with him.
Yeah. Okay.
And I met George, and yeah, so a small world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing before you go, I've asked a lot of people, and you know, you've done so much in the college. How do you see things looking currently? You know, things developing and getting bigger, and any thoughts on the direction of the college? Or?
Well, obviously, getting bigger and expanding programs really opens lots of avenues for lots of people. But by the same token, it can also be interpreted as being a diluting effect. And one thing that a number of persons that have been involved in both the basic and applied science research and clinical research that we're always concerned about is that we don't dilute the scientific contributions of the college.
I've heard this today a couple times
Yeah.
now. Yeah, so I think there's something there that needs to be looked at.
And you know, this has been brought to the attention of persons in the national office as well as officers, and certain things that have taken place in recent years have been, you know, received with mixed reviews. Bringing in large numbers into the membership who are neither providing direct clinical service nor conducting research.
True, yeah, that's right. Yeah, good point.
So it's well, I don't want to cast aspersions at the fitness industry and so forth, and people that get trained to do testing under the supervision of either a Ph.D. or an M.D., but then they pass along their results and data to them for interpretation. Rather than, I don't see that person at all being identified as a scientist. Very valuable contribution, but...
good point, yeah, I think that's a very valid point.
So, the other thing I'm sure you've heard any number of times that for a number of years after I joined the college, we all met in one room.
Yes, oh yes.
So that you always were hearing what was going on in other areas. And I think it was the meeting in Seattle, the first meeting in Seattle, which I don't recall the year, but that was the first time we had side-by-side simultaneous sessions.
And that was only 2.
It was 2.
As compared to 30 or whatever.
And actually it was sort of funny because you talk about, well, you know, always knowing what's going on. The hotel was so old and tired, I think it was the Olympic Hotel, that they had this big ballroom and these sliding partitions that would go down the center, and that divided. So you'd be sitting there listening to one program and you could hear the other program.
So you still maybe did
exactly,
miss it.
Exactly.
Well, Skip, thanks so much for coming and talking, and that's really valuable, good stuff.
It's always fun.
Yeah, thanks so much.